Hi, I'm Chuck Colson with this week's 2-Minute Warning. Every time I'm on the air, I try to help you to think Christianly about all of life. Those of you who watch this regularly or listen to me on the radio know that I pour out a lot of material to equip you to deal with the tough, sophisticated questions that get thrown at us. Well, I had an encounter this past week with a healthcare professional that changed my whole perspective on how we do this. Let me explain. This very bright, middle-aged practitioner was treating me for a chronic condition, no big deal. At the end of the exam, she scheduled a follow-up appointment. I said, why? I don't need that. She said, well, you're on Medicare. I told her that's right, but I didn't like spending the taxpayers' money if it wasn't necessary. That launched her into a discussion about an elderly woman, terminally ill, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for treatment that won't save her life. And then she said, I wish more people took the position you did, Mr. Colson. We could save wasting money on medical care. I then asked her what she would do with that woman who was spending all that money on treatment. Well, she fumbled a little bit with her answer, but it caused me to ask her a second question. If you're going to stop giving her treatment, who will make that decision, whether the care is needed or not? She said it ought to be done with the doctors and patients. Yeah, fine, but what if the doctors and patients can't make the decision or won't? Well, she said some independent panel will have to do it. Well, then I asked her what would be the guidelines for that panel. Well, she said they'd have to figure out how to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people with the resources available. I said, well, that may seem reasonable, but then I asked her if she was familiar with the standards the Germans used in the 30s. They did the same thing. She wasn't. I explained that the system with the smartest doctors in the world set up panels which decided whether a patient was incurably ill or severely mentally handicapped. If so, the patient just disappeared. She looked shocked. So I asked her, who ought to make that decision? Her answer was, well, they've solved this problem in England. I then asked her what she would have done with a certain cook that a friend of mine in Oxford befriended. The cook was waiting for an operation that would have saved her life, but she was too far down the list. She died before she could get the operation. The practitioner looked horrified. I continued to ask her questions. I never gave her an answer. Along the way, I did explain that when Christianity began to sweep across the Greco-Roman world, Christians introduced a radical concept that humans are created in the image of God, so every life is precious. All of our ethics flow from that one radical idea. Within less than 10 minutes of discussion, she ended up saying, it's common sense, isn't it? I said, yes, it is. We can't play God, and there really is no in-between. She then startled me by asking me whether I'd seen the movie Expelled. I told her I had, and that Ben Stein was a good friend of mine, and that the argument there is no God is fallacious. As I was getting up to leave her office, she said, you've made me rethink a lot of things about my own life. Now, here's the reason I tell you this story. You don't have to be a great apologist to ask people questions. If you ask the people the right questions, you'll force them to carry their own beliefs to their logical conclusion, and you'll get them to the point that this medic got to. Either we're created in the image of God and life is sacred, or life is expendable and somebody other than us is going to decide who lives and who dies. Now this is an easy argument to make. I get really tired of people telling me, Chuck Colson, you can do this, but how about us? Well, you can do it. Just to show you how easy it is, I've got a couple of resources here at the Colson Center. The first is an article which I've written, which goes into more detail about the discussion I had with this healthcare professional. Also, the same process will enable you to challenge the presuppositions of your secular friends on a host of issues. We don't have to be great philosophers. We have to be wise enough to know the good questions to ask. My colleague John Stonestreet at Summit Ministries has written a great article for us explaining this process in detail. You can read it here at the Colson Center. And I want to recommend another book written by my friend Philip Johnson, who was the great Berkeley law professor who became a great advocate of intelligent design. It's about the right questions. It's entitled The Right Questions, and you can get that book at the Colson Center bookstore. I know what you're thinking. Chuck Colson studied all this stuff. He knows what he's talking about. Okay, look, you can do this. I'm tired of people telling me they can't. We can simply force people to follow the logic of their own belief system to the ultimate consequences of their beliefs. That's something everybody can learn to do. Try it with one of your secular friends. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to, if you've tried this already, I want you to come onto the website here on the comments and tell me about it, because I'd like you to use your example. If you haven't tried it, go do it. and get back to me with the example. I'd love to be able to share this on Breakpoint Broadcast. We got to start getting people talking about this stuff. We've got to stop being passive. We've got to start using our minds, and we've got to force other people who come to ridiculous conclusions to carry those ridiculous conclusions out to what becomes, as the medical practitioner put it, common sense. I'm Chuck Colson. That's this week's 2-Minute Warning.